All right, welcome back, True Seeker. Late Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. A lot of really big headlines today, and a very common theme in those headlines, if you know the language of Gematria. So, we're going to talk about a lot here, but we're going to start with Shaun King calling for the removal of white Jesus statues, saying that they're a symbol of white supremacy. And the thing that's provoking about his remarks for many Christians is he worded it in a way that makes it seem that if you have, a picture or a symbol of white Jesus, he made it seem as if you're a white supremacist. And that probably isn't the exact point he was trying to make, but the damage is already done because he talked about something so insensitively that is provoking for so many, it can't be undone. But I want people to understand why this was the viral news story on June 23rd, 2020, despite his remarks being made on social media the evening of June 22nd. All day June 23rd, mainstream media talked about this. And I want you to see why. So, let me scroll down the page. Today, June 23rd, is the day leaving 191 days left in the year. And in Gematria, Society of Jesus sums to 191 with the alphabetic order, 56 with the alphabetic order and rules numerology. And as we've talked about, Black Lives Matter equals 56, as does Washington, D.C., where the Society of Jesus has been longer than the nation's capital. And remember, it was June 5th, a date that can be written 5-6 like 56, where Black Lives Matter was painted in the streets of Washington, D.C. Another black organization that has the Society of Jesus connection is the Black Panther Party, which sums to 191 with the alphabetic order, the exact same as Society of Jesus. And during the time of coronavirus, where Black Lives Matter has come to power because of the George Floyd killing, we've also had the House Resolution 6666 brought to the U.S. Congress by the former Black Panther Bobby L. Rush. And again, just another prominent name and another parallel to the Society of Jesus. Again, if you're new here, been exposing for months how it is the Society of Jesus that is completely behind the coronavirus pandemic, as well as the George Floyd killing, which was no accident being shown in the media, meant to provoke people who are already provoked by what's going on with the coronavirus agenda. So, anyhow, on the day leaving 191 days left in the year, this controlled opposition by the Society of Jesus, Black Lives Matter, says, time to take down white Jesus. And again, it's all about divide and conquer. A Jesuit motto is divide and conquer, and that's what this story is all about, because a divided people are a more easily controlled people, and ultimately the purpose of all of these agendas is to steer the people of the world into a trap so that they are more easily controlled by the powers that shouldn't be. They have people fighting with each other, not seeing that at this moment, their livelihoods and their way of life are being taken away from them by the most wealthy people in the world. The same people that back and fund organizations such as Black Lives Matter and the Black Panther Party, both of which were controlled opposition and never intended to help improve the quality of life for Black Americans. In light of the Jesuits or the Society of Jesus serving the Roman Catholic Church, it is also interesting that Roman Catholicism sums to 173 and 259, just like Black Lives Matter. Remember, 173 is the 40th prime number, and right now Shaun King is 40 years old. He went to school in Atlanta, where the Martin Luther King Jr. family is. Here's Shaun King, born September 17th, 1979. He'll turn 41 later this year. The word King equals 41. And notice he attended Morehouse. Morehouse equals 43. Again, today leaves 191 days left in the year where he's making these big headlines, probably the biggest of his life. 191 is the 43rd prime number. Jesus Christ also sums to 43. In this case, so does George Floyd, so does Masonic. If you want to add to that list, so does Civil War. They have the 43 car in NASCAR supporting Black Lives Matter, as we've covered. Morehouse College, 74, like I Can't Breathe, like Masonic. So again, just things we've been talking about. Morehouse down in Atlanta, like the Boulay, and again like the Martin Luther King Jr. family. By the way, with regards to the fact that Shaun King will turn 41 years old this year, meaning he's in his 41st year of his life right now, his birthday, September 17th, can be written 17/9, like 179, the 41st prime, and the name Shaun King is 41 with the alphabetic order in Will's numerology, whereas King is 41 with the alphabetic order. Okay, so Shaun King, the perfect puppet, with that symbolic civil rights last name, creating all sorts of fighting amongst the different viewpoints of the world today. And again, that's what they want. They want people fighting and arguing and tearing each other down instead of uniting for a common cause. And notice the mainstream media isn't promoting any voices who are helping people unite for a common cause for a worthy agenda. And of course, that's not by accident. Okay, so on this day, leaving 191 days left in the year, we get a very suspicious earthquake in Mexico, where at first it was reported as a 7.7 magnitude, only to later be reduced to a 7.4 magnitude. And this came on a date with 69 and 33 numerology in southern Mexico. Mexico has Gematria of 69 and 33. It's a 7.4. We talk about the number 74 with earthquakes often. Recall the July 4th Southern California earthquake of 2019. That had an epicenter on a military base. In Gematria, energy, weapon, and nuclear all summed to 74. The Manhattan Project to develop these weapons was named after a city on the 74th meridian west. The Trinity test, where many of the tests happen, has the Gematria of 74. 74, symbolic number. And they said that the epicenter was in El Coyo, having Gematria of 33 like Mexico. They so often bring 74 and 33 together in what I've routinely called Jesus rituals since I began teaching about this in 2013, and that's because Jesus is put on the cross at age 33, and in Gematria, Jesus, Messiah, cross, gospel, parables all sum to 74. So consider this ritual happened in Mexico on the day leaving 191 days left in the year, corresponding with the Society of Jesus, who operates on behalf of the Catholic Church. And think about where this happened today. In Mexico, one of the most Catholic populations in the world, that must be looked at by the church as a great accomplishment, spreading their religion across the world, creating an obedient populace, a good Catholic populace. So Mexico, becomes the location for this ritual, the fitting location. And remember, this wasn't far from Mexico City, which on September 19th, 2017, had that major earthquake on the 32-year anniversary of the last major earthquake in Mexico City. And again, Jesse Ventura, former governor in Minnesota, former WWE star and movie star, wrote about in his book how when he was a Navy SEAL, they used to have missions where they would plant these large explosive devices off the coast of Mexico. And something tells me he wasn't lying. Again, the United States of America detonated atomic and nuclear weapons underground and high up in the atmosphere for the better part of 50 years. And you have to ask, for what purpose? And now for all these ritualistic earthquakes that always point back to the same numbers, you just gotta wonder. As for them first reporting that it was a 7.7 before 7.4, Christ equals 77. So you go from 7.7 to 7.4, Jesus 74, Christ 77 on Society of Jesus Day. Definitely don't think it was an accident. And over the years, we've covered many of these very suspicious earthquakes in Mexico by the numbers. Wrote about a number of them in the first book I put out that was released in March of 2018. Also today, the Jesuit Anthony Fauci getting a lot of attention. So, don't forget, Anthony Fauci said at the Society of Jesus University, Georgetown, that the Trump administration would deal with a pandemic and a surprise outbreak. Another big story today in the world of coronavirus was Novak Djokovic, the man who the world of tennis is scripted around, has been for some time. Considered the world's #1 player because it's scripted around him. Be interesting if he'd even rank in the top 100 if it wasn't rigged. But this news today about him having coronavirus. His birthday is May 22nd. He's 33 years old, meaning today, June 23rd, was his 33rd day of being 33 years old. And the story is that he came down with coronavirus after hosting a tournament that was called a Drea, summing to 33. Now he's got the Corona 33. As we know, Masonry, Secrecy, Order, they all sum to 33. Plus today had 33 date numerology. Novak Djokovic, test positive for coronavirus after Adria Tour event. And I couldn't help but notice this name also has the Gematria 152. As I've been pointing out, that number is being encoded everywhere right now. And my assumption is that it's pointing to the 14th Amendment anniversary on July 9th that'll turn 152 years old. I could be wrong that that's what it's all about. I'm trying to figure out why 152 is being coded everywhere, but that is my thought for now. So, in light of this also coming on the Society of Jesus Day, the Jesuits who have so much influence in sports, don't forget how symbolic 33 is to the story of Jesus in light of Djokovic in this Super 33 ritual today, June 23rd. Also today, Rayshard Brooks buried in the church that MLK once spoke at in Atlanta. And remember, Rayshard Brooks was killed June 12th, 612, after the George Floyd killing in the 612 area code, and the George Floyd killing followed the killing in Georgia of Ahmaud Arbery, which is perfectly synced back to the killing of Rayshard Brooks. And then recall the day after the Rayshard Brooks killing on June 13th, the day leaving 201 days left in the year, the Wendy's burn that turned into the site of a massive protest today. And 201's a huge number with the Jesuits, who were once saved by Catherine the Great, who preserved 201 Jesuits after they were banned by the Catholic Church, reminding that the coronavirus outbreak simulation was event 201, and in Gematria, the Jesuit order equals 201, Ignatius of Loyola equals 201, their founder, the only Jesuit pope ever, Jorge Mario Bergoglio equals 201, and so on. Let us not forget that George Perry Floyd equals 201. And there's a million more things with that, as we've discussed. But the point is, the Jesuit fingerprints all over everything, and now bringing MLK's name into contact with Rayshard Brooks, as they also did with George Floyd. And don't forget that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed April 4th, 1968, the 95th day of the leap year that 1968 was, and also a date with 95 numerology corresponding with the Martin Luther, who wrote the 95 Thesis against the Catholic Church, and then was killed by the Jesuit order, who were established on the day leaving 95 days left in the year. Remember further that George Floyd was killed on the 93rd meridian west in Minneapolis, Minnesota, equaling 93, like Martin Luther King Jr. 93, like God's Son 93, like Nazareth 93, like Crucifix 93, like Jesus being crucified from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Again, all these numbers in these rituals all point back one direction, to the Society of Jesus, to the Jesuits. And you see right up there next to the picture of Rayshard Brooks in the church that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at, they have the cross with the circle divided into 4 sections like the 4 seasons dictated by the sun, not to be confused with the Son of God, Jesus, despite the Catholic Church worshiping on Sunday. Reminding that they say the sun is 93 million miles away. For the record, Malcolm X also equals 93, and again, him and Martin Luther King Jr. only met one time in history, a date with 93 numerology, March 26th, 64. Okay, next up. MLB agrees to 60-game regular season concluding September 27th. Well, it's funny that they did this today, the day leaving 191 days left in the year, because again, Society of Jesus equals 191, and their birthday is September 27th. So on the day leaving 191 days left in the year, they agreed to a regular season schedule that concludes on September 27th. And for all my sports fans out there, 3 teams that I really have my eye on just based on this riddle right now: the Minnesota Twins, and I'll get to why, and the Atlanta Braves, and I'll get to why. I'm also going to watch the New York Yankees because they got the 191 connection as well. But I need to do a lot more research on this. Don't take this as a prediction, but if you made me throw a name out from the AL and NL today for who's going to meet in this shortened season World Series, I'd take the Twins and the Braves in the George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks related championship. And without even doing much more research, I'd be surprised if at least one of those 2 teams don't make the World Series. They're both considered contenders. And where's the slide I wanted to show you? Here we go. If the season does begin July 24th, which they're saying could be the day it starts, it'll either be July 23rd or July 24th. It'll be 60 days after the killing of George Floyd. It'll be a 60-game schedule, and Minnesota Twins equals 60. And don't forget, on the day of the George Floyd killing, Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, turns 60 years old, who's become a big part of this. And there's other things that can be said about 60, but I could see them structuring the baseball season around these 2 respective teams, since, again, this riddle's going on right now between Minneapolis, the 612 area code, and Atlanta, where Rayshard Brooks was killed on 612. So, if the season does open July 24th, another team to just keep an eye on in light of how they might be used ritualistically is the Seattle Mariners. Seattle, Washington, and Atlanta, Georgia both equal 247, and that date can be written 24/7. Again, on July 21st, it'll mark the 247-year anniversary of the banning of the Jesuits by the Catholic Church. So George Floyd and the time of Gemini, the twins in the Twin Cities. It's all ritual. And again, the news and the sports, they're always synced together. But you got to take enough time to do the proper amount of decoding and make sure you got the riddle right. That's just my early hunch. Also today, the FBI came out and said that the noose supposedly found in Bubba Wallace's garage had been hanging there for years, so there was no foul play, and it's just a coincidence that Bubba Wallace, who's supposedly black, even though I can't tell that he is, must be one of those Melungeons, but it's just a coincidence that he got put in the garage with the whole noose thing in light of everything going on with his car, the Black Lives Matter car, and the banning of the Confederate flag. It's just all a big coincidence. And remember, he drives the 43 car. NASCAR equals 43, Civil War 43, George Floyd 43, Morehouse 43 with Shaun King. The FBI agent who spoke on this today, Paul Damon, not too far from Demon, his name even has Gematria like Civil War. So, don't think that was any coincidence. And just in case people forgot, the most important thing that's gone down with all this NASCAR stuff was this right here. When NASCAR banned the Confederate flag on June 10th, 2020, a date with 56 and 20 numerology that could be written 10/6 like 106, where NASCAR's 56, 20, and 106. NASCAR's also 43, and they made the 43 car the Black Lives Matter car, and Black Lives Matter's 56 and 106, and Black's 106, and the phrase I can't breathe 106, and it's all just so perfectly coordinated. And beyond that, the word noose has gematria of 67 and 68. And on June 21st and June 22nd, which were 67 and 68 date numerology. Here, let me just pull up the calculator real quick so I can show you noose forwards and backwards. With the alphabetic order 68, with the alphabetic order and rules of numerology 67. And you know what? Now that I think about it, this news was big on the 22nd of the month and today the 23rd. So I guess they hit all the gematria values of noose. But anyway, on this days when the noose was supposedly found, and this happened at Talladega, which has the gematria of 63 and 27 like racism, Talladega also 54 like Jesuit order. And, yeah, I don't know if Bubba Wallace is part of the boule. If he is, I'd have something more to say about that, but I'll save it for now. ESPN gave us the nice 47-second story about how NASCAR stood for Bubba Wallace against the noose being found in his garage, which apparently was just a door pole for opening and closing the garage. Such a joke. Also yesterday, the Seattle police announced that they were going to return to their precinct that they had abandoned on June 8th, 6/8. The day of their announcement for their return was a date with 68 numerology, and of course, Seattle, Washington equals 68. If you never heard me talk about the year 1968, New York City, Seattle, Washington, how the plan went into motion for 9/11 as well as coronavirus, you can go back and revisit that work, or you can sign up and pledge $1 to my Patreon page, read about the first 150 pages of my new book. I know I told you guys I was going to make the book about 150 pages long. It's going to be more like 300 pages. I couldn't help myself. It could be longer, but there's just a lot that needs to go in there. So anyway, the second chapter of the book is all about 1968 and the significance of the number 68 and how important it is to Seattle. And since writing that chapter, you've had these two things happen. The police abandoned on June 8th, and now on the 68 date numerology announced their return. So again, there could be no mistake about the patterns and what's truly being done. We said to watch out for the autonomous zone on June 20th, 20/6, like the 206. We thought we'd see some action in the autonomous zone. A person ended up getting killed there, and that ends up being the reasoning for 2 days later for them to return to the precinct. That date, June 20th, in addition to the 206, it also had 46 date numerology, and sacrifice equals 206 and 46. They said a 19-year-old was killed. Seattle's 19. Just makes you wonder. Could it have been a ritual sacrifice for that area created by controlled opposition right next to the Jesuit University, Seattle U, in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, where Capitol Hill equals Jesuit order? Also yesterday, on the 68 date numerology, these 9 hand sanitizers may contain a potentially fatal ingredient, FDA warns. That was a date with 68 numerology, hand sanitizer 68. And don't get mad at me, I've been telling you guys since January, when all this crap started, you know, hand sanitizers are not good for you. And like I said back at the beginning of this, people are going to be dousing themselves in chemicals that are actually harmful to them, carcinogenic, and meanwhile this virus probably way overhyped, and I think what I said months ago has been absolutely proven true. So anyway, just realize they put out this news about hand sanitizers on the most perfect date, of course, what they do every single day. And you know, they were also going wild with coronavirus, how much better it is in Europe than the United States on this 68 date. Don't forget that coronavirus was coined in 1968, that infamous year. Also, I did a little more research on the Golan Heights, naming the area Trump Heights, where the funding was approved to develop Trump Heights in Israel on Trump's 74th birthday. I went back and looked, and I saw that they started to hype this Trump Heights area on September 16th, 2019. That is really creepy. And the reason why is because that's the day leaving 106 days left in the year, and prophecy equals 106. And in Israel, some circles are talking about Donald Trump as the Jewish Messiah. Messiah equals 74, so does Jewish. On his 74th birthday, this area that was hyped on Prophecy Day, if you will, was funded to become Trump Heights. And that was a date, September 16, 2019, was 64 and 44 numerology. Israel's 64 and 44, as is Zion. Also, from September 16th to his 74th birthday was a span of 39 weeks, and there's 39 books in the Old Testament, the Jewish section of the Bible, that these prophecies relate to. So, isn't it amazing how the mainstream media can carry headlines one day of Donald Trump being anti-Semitic and possibly carrying around a copy of Mein Kampf, and then the next day, you know, there's the story of how his head's on a shekel, raising money in Israel to build the third temple for the time of the Jewish Messiah. It's just nonstop confusion and mind games, but then when you know the code, you just see through how all of it is ritual. Undeniably. So, heads up on that one. Also in the news, Batman director dead at 80, and this was June 22nd, 2020. The date was 68 numerology. Donald John Trump, 68, who was also front and center that day. More Trump staffers in Tulsa test positive. See if it ends up being like Clade X, where the president and vice president get wiped out by the pandemic, making the Speaker of the House the president, which in our case would be Nancy Pelosi, the good Catholic. Again, if you don't know about Clade X, definitely check out Clade X. Happened May 15, 2018, 666 days before the coronavirus pandemic was declared March 11, 2020. It is mind-blowing. But with regards to this Batman director, he died on the 68 date numerology. He died 68 days before his birthday, and on the same day of his death, 68-year-old Michael Keaton was announced to be returning to play Batman again in the Flash movie. And Michael Keaton's 68. And with regards to Donald John Trump equaling 68, remember, Donald Trump once said, "I am Batman." Covered that story, wrote about it actually in my first book, because there's a lot of relevance to it. And you might recall when he first became president, a number of deaths related to Batman. All covered in the first book. In light of Batman, the old television series, in the 33rd episode of that TV series, it's revealed that Batman, his family legacy, includes creating Skull and Bones at Yale. And Skull and Bones is an offshoot of the Bavarian Illuminati. Bavarian Illuminati equals 80. So that's what stands out to me about Joel Schumacher dying at 80 in light of his connection to Batman. And you'll notice CNN brought attention to his film St. Elmo's Fire. Hold on, before I show you this thing about St. Elmo's Fire, he died on June 22nd, the 174th day of the year, number of the beast 174, Batman 666. Call it a coincidence. But in light of CNN, who I follow the most, because they seem to give away the best hints in their news media, since they brought attention in the headline to St. Elmo's Fire, I had to look it up because I didn't know what it was. And St. Elmo's Fire is a 1985 American coming-of-age film directed by Joel Schumacher and starring Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy, Demi Moore, Judd Nelson, Ellie Sheedy, Mar Whittingham. It centers on a clique of recent graduates of Washington, D.C.'s Georgetown University. What do you know? The Jesuit school, the Society of Jesus School, founded by John Carroll when he was 54 years old, when John Carroll equals 54, and Jesuit order equals 54, and sun equals 54. What is their logo? What is the instrument of time? Or what dictates time? And the Catholic Church gave us the solar calendar, the Gregorian calendar, and the English language, which is all synced together. Again, just think about it. It's logic. It's not hard to see who's laid down the code that's being used every single day. So, everything pointing to the Jesuits. Also, another premature death, former NFL player, Max Tirick, dead at 26. And notice the media puts out the image of him wearing his 62 jersey with the Chargers. He died on June 20th. The date that can be written 20/6 like 206, a date with 46 numerology. Notice the Gematria of sacrifice, 46, 62, 206. Dead at 26 on June 20th, 6 plus 20, 26, wearing the number 62. The day he died also had 66 numerology. Remember, NFL 66 in Jewish Gematria, the 11th triangular number, like how it's a game of 11 on 11, and he was the 66th pick of the 2016 draft. They say he died on a hike while with his family, and the details are vague. And again, it just makes you wonder what is really going on with some of these families. Because again, you have to remember, a lot of time the reason these guys are even in the leagues is because they're born into families that are part of this cabal. So they already had a foot in the door. So it just makes you wonder what's going on with his family. Somebody else climbing the ladder? Maybe the family was disappointed that he didn't cut it in the NFL despite being a relatively high draft pick. You just never know. But I doubt it was a coincidence in light of the fact that this entire community was looking at this date as a major sacrifice date, and then you get this story. So, okay, just this slide right here the other day, this whole front news page, everything just up here, look at this. So Florida's front and center. And in Gematria, Florida equals 43. Think about George W. Bush, who became the 43rd president after the state Florida called the election for him when his brother was the 43rd governor of Florida at the time, Jeb Bush, and his father was the 43rd vice president, and he and his father went to Yale, which equals 43. But anyway, you got this story about Florida and the pandemic. Florida's 43, pandemic's 43. You have all this uncertainty about what's going on in the nation, with the markets, with the president, with everything. You got this story down here about 4.3 million homeowners missed their mortgage payment last month. Collapses 43. You got the NASCAR story focused on Bubba Wallace, who drives the 43 car. NASCAR 43 as well. You got George Floyd 43, Civil War 43. Again, you look at the headlines with Gematria lens and you just say, okay, a lot of the same numbers being put before my eyes all at the same time, as if it's all part of some big magic spell, some big magic potion. And essentially that's what it is. Somehow, some way, this encoded crap fools the minds of the masses every single day. Also, lots of statues coming down, even Teddy Roosevelt, former president. Remember, Teddy Roosevelt is the president who said we needed to secure Hawaii to save the white race, because he argued that if the United States didn't secure Hawaii, Asians would take over the world. So anyway, his statue's being torn down. It was put up in 1936, meaning it was torn down 84 years later. And as we know, Jesuits 84, the Jesuit Order's 84, the Catholic Church is 84, United States of America is 84, Masonry 84, Zionism 84, the Superior General of the Jesuits just died at 84, Pope Francis, the first Jesuit Pope, will turn 84 later this year, so on and so forth. So, I'm sure there's more to it. It's kind of lazy just because I've been working on the book so hard and just trying to decode little news stories as they come through here and there. Also shocking, and I'm going to have to go back and change the beginning of my book because I wrote about the Albert Pike statue again, just as I did in the first book. And when I wrote the part of the book about Albert Pike, the statue wasn't torn down yet. And I do find this really interesting that the Albert Pike statue was torn down. This happened on Juneteenth. Juneteenth has that Gematria 41, like Albert's 41, like Pike's 41. 41's the 13th prime. A lot of 13 related features to that statue. Of course, he was a Scottish Rite Freemason in the House of the Temple. The Scottish Rite Freemason headquarters in D.C. has the unfinished pyramid on the top of the building that has 13 layers of bricks, just like the unfinished pyramid on the dollar bill with 13 layers of bricks, a number that's symbolic of time. The moon in the 13 cycles, the sun in the 12 constellations, 13, Jesus and the 12 disciples. The name Pike also has Gematria 67, which is the 19th prime, and his statue was torn down on June 19th. That statue was put up in 1901, meaning it would have turned 119 years old later this year. That all-seeing eye number, familiar phrase to the Masons. Civil War is also 119, and he was a Civil War general for the South, the only Confederate general to have a statue in Washington, D.C. because he's such a prominent Freemason. Washington, D.C., the Masonic city. Masonic 43. And just realize all of these events with these statues being taken down, these are all orchestrated. These are all people that are part of this organization, this club. Very easily, police could be out arresting all the people doing this. They could easily be shutting down these things. I mean, it takes time to put up, these cables and gather these crowds to tear down statues. As many police as there are in this nation, they could be shutting all these things down before they even happen, but realize it's all ritual. It's all about divide and conquer. It's all about turning over, another leaf, moving on to another age. And perhaps, like I said, some weeks back, some months back, time's flying by, the Jesuits are really showing their hand right now that they are the ones running the show. And perhaps that's also why Albert Pike his statue being torn down at this time. The Masons look like a subsidiary of the Jesuits. So. Another story coming out on June 18th, 2020. That was the 6444 date that we said to circle months in advance. There was the reported killing of an 18-year-old Latino man shot and killed by a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy. An 18-year-old killed on the 18th. Race equals 18. All these headlines about race. Again, I explained the ritual of race in 18, which is why I made the 18th chapter in my first book about how race wars are contrived by the numbers. Same numbers that are being stamped all over everything going on right now. Everything that has been going on. But that 6444 date, the kill numbers, killed by an officer, 44. The young man killed, Andres Guardado, Gematria of 60, like police. Kind of like how George Floyd was killed on the 60th birthday of Amy Klobuchar. The name Andres Guardado also has the Gematria of 84, like Gardena, California, where it happened, like Jesuit. And again, just looks like more news by the numbers, more stories meant to provoke. Fuel the protests, fuel the rioting, fuel the chaos. So again, I was a little bit lazy on that decode, but the 18-year-old on the 18th and just the traditional ciphers. Some key alignments. Okay, on Sunday, June 21st, 2020, Father's Day, there was some confrontation with the protesters and the police in Compton. And just to remind people, well, this year, June 21st, Father's Day, was the 173rd day of the year. Black Lives Matter 173. There were Black Lives Matter protests worldwide on the 173rd day of the year. And don't forget this Black Lives Matter protester, Brady Bob, who was supposedly a childhood friend of George Floyd, who wore the fraternity t-shirt for Alpha Phi Alpha. We pointed out how the George Floyd killing from the Alpha Phi Alpha establishment date, which happens to be Jay-Z's birthday, Fred Hampton was killed in history. From that establishment date to the killing of George Floyd was 173 days later. And again, Black Lives Matter 173, the 40th prime number, like how Shaun King, the leader, is 40 years old right now. And anyway, 173, we'd already documented the ritual with Black Lives Matter. Then on the 173rd day of the year, you get international protests. And out of all those headlines, or out of all those protests, Compton became the story. Remember, Compton's on the 33rd parallel. Compton equals 33, like race war, like police, like LAPD, reminding of LAPD killing, or not, excuse me, not killing, but beating Rodney King on March 3rd, 3-3, similar to the recent killing of George Floyd, which prompted rioting on East 33rd Street in Minneapolis. Again, Masonry, federal secrecy order, all 33. Father's Day has the Gematria of 163, like asphyxiation, like cigarettes. Remember, they said Eric Garner was illegally selling cigarettes. They said Michael Brown was stealing cigarettes. They say George Floyd was trying to buy cigarettes with a counterfeit 20. And of course, cigarettes have tobacco, and tobacco makes you think of slavery. And the name George Perry Floyd has Gematria of 102, like the word slavery, like how the American Civil War began on the 102nd day of the year. All this stuff is riddle and ritual. And with the same redundant numbers. It's just like when you watch that movie about NWA out of Compton, straight out of Compton. They give you the man wearing the Dorset 33 jersey. Not an accident. Okay, so Donald Trump, for his Tulsa rally, reportedly had less than 6,200 people. Hold on, let me get it here. Here it is right here. So they were expecting 100,000 people at least, but they had less than 6,200 show up for the Tulsa rally. And notice, just in Gematria, Tulsa is 62. I mean, they'll just report whatever numbers they want to report. Less than 6,200. Why not just write about 6,000? Again, rhetorical question. Learn Gematria, you see why they put the numbers in front of your face that they do. The rally came 137 days to the election, November 3rd. Big number there in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., 137. White House, 137. Government, 137. Authority, 137. That's the 33rd prime number. Masonry, secrecy, federal order, they're all 33. The Masonic text, morals and dogma, equals 137. That's why I'm surprised that statue of Albert Pike got torn down, because he's holding the book Morals and Dogma. Well, even though it's no longer there, it was for a very long time, and the point still stands. And it isn't to say that they won't rebuild the statue. It's 11 feet tall. Maybe they'll come back and make it 13 feet tall. Yeah, and again, just the last few days, a lot of headlines about how young people, their numbers are really climbing rapidly because they're not respecting the social distancing. So says the news. And here in Washington State today, on the day leaving 191 days left in the year, the big Jesuit number, Jay Inslee, the governor, has made masks mandatory for everyone in the state. I'm happy to say, though, that I went to the post office yesterday, and I'm in Yakima, Washington, where we were on the mask orders prior to the rest of the state as of this weekend. But I had noticed in recent weeks that it seemed like at least 80% of people are wearing masks out in public already. And what I thought was really interesting is when I went to the post office yesterday, I didn't have a mask on, and I was seeing if I was going to be the outlier. But when I went to the post office, and lately when I've gone to the post office, I mean, like, almost everybody's had a mask on. But yesterday when I went in there, only one person had one on, and none of the employees were wearing masks. And there were like 4 people besides myself who did not have a mask on. I thought, wow, some resistance. Maybe because people were told they had to wear it, they just decided they weren't going to wear it today. So I gotta say, might have been a fluke, but if not, it was impressive. Anyhow, from the day that the stay-at-home orders were declared for Washington State, which was March 23rd, to June 23rd, notice both on the 23rd, Wuhan 23, but from March 23rd to June 23rd, a span of 93 days, and of course, Wuhan coronavirus is 93, and 93 has to do with time, like the sun being 93 million miles away, like Saturn, the keeper of time, equaling 93. And of course, it is a number that relates to Jesus as well, since it was Society of Jesus Day, the day leaving 191 days left in the year. But just goes to show, it's all being done ritualistically. It's ritual. It's not action based on data or keeping us safer. It is simply ritual, because we're being put through a ritual with real consequences that's changing life as we know it, that's transitioning wealth from regular people to the wealthiest of people while taking away our rights and making us understand why we're going to live in this reality where we're spied on at all times by big tech and big brother, and how we need to just, follow directions and stay, what's the phrase we use here? I can't think what it is right now, it's too late. Stay home, stay healthy, I think that's what they call it. Anyway. Something else. Don't forget, the first celebrity to come down with the virus was Tom Hanks of Sleepless in Seattle, a movie that came out in '93. We covered that on March 11th. Speaking of weird things going on in the world, Saharan dust plume expected to impact the southeast U.S. If you're already in the southeast today, or from the West Coast perspective, tomorrow, Wednesday, June 24th. But since when? Saharan dust plume, a big cloud of dust? from the desert of Africa, traveling all the way across the Atlantic to the U.S. It's like South America as well. I mean, it just seems so absurd. And it just makes me wonder what's really going on. How can that much dust make it across that large of a body of water? What stood out to me about this thing, the Saharan dust plume, it has gematria of 239, and that's the 52nd prime number. And again, if you've read my first book, the chapter on weather warfare talks about the use of the numbers 239 and 52 in weather warfare. That is actually the work of the military and not Mother Nature. So I don't even know how you pull this one off. I mean, this is way above my pay grade, but something is definitely not right with the Saharan dust plume. By the way, I caught wind of this story on June 21st when CNN had it up on the front page. When you run it the other way, Saharan dust plume's 193, and June 21st was the day leaving 193 days left in the year, which is the 44th prime number, and military's 44. So, if you're in the southeast, I'd love to hear what you see of this Saharan dust plume. It says it could cause allergies. Yeah. I bet it will. Okay, and also on Father's Day, they had to give us a story like this. A father was choked to death by the NYPD 42 years ago. We know how they love to bring 42 and 59 together. NYPD's 59. And, of course, slavery's 42, slave 59, just always bringing these numbers together. And this was the day of the Black Lives Matter protest worldwide. On that same day, they gave you this story. A 9-year-old figure skater performed a touching routine at the Black Lives Matter mural. Remember when you write out 9 as a word, it's 42? 42, 59, again and again and again. February equals 42, Black History Month, the month that ends on the 59th day of the year. Motown Records came out in 59, and Detroit on the 42nd parallel, and so on. The 42nd pick of the NFL draft this year, a black man with a name having gematria 59. So, again and again, just dangling those numbers in front of you. And shout out to the member in the community who noticed this about the movie Falling Down. If you've never seen Falling Down, I suggest you watch this movie. It came out the day of the 93 World Trade Center bombing. Again, the World Trade Centers would eventually fall down. But somebody caught how in the movie, in one of the scenes, he's in this building, and in the background, there's 2 Corona Street signs set up. Corona, Corona. And of course, 9/11 and the coronavirus pandemic perfectly synced together. Parts of the same agenda about taking away rights, building a surveillance state, keeping people in fear, building the one world government. So, I haven't seen this movie for years, but if anybody wants to take the time to watch it, maybe there's a few more gems you can find in there. But yeah, I don't think that is any accident that they had Corona in the background. And keep in mind, a corona also relates to the light shown around the sun in the time of eclipse, something that is part of the symbol of the Jesuit order's logo. So, good work right there. Nice little graphic they made. Thank you. And somebody else also sent me this. This was from March 9th. So this was 2 days before the pandemic was declared. Something that was shown on mainstream media. Disease deaths per day worldwide. And they were just showing in relation to coronavirus, which was a growing story at the time. Remember, the World Health Organization had told us to prepare for pandemic on the 56th day of the year, February 25th. But 2 days before the pandemic, they were showing that coronavirus deaths were 56. And as we know, coronavirus equals 56, like Society of Jesus, like Anthony Fauci, like Washington, D.C., like mind control, like toilet paper, like the rest of the list. But look at that, 56. And compare that to, again, this is Disease deaths per day worldwide. Tuberculosis, 3,000. Hepatitis B, 2,400. Pneumonia, 2,200. HIV/AIDS, over 2,000. Malaria, over 2,000. Something I can't even pronounce, 1,600. Rotavirus, 1,200. Seasonal flu, 1,000. Norovirus, 548. Whooping cough, 440. Typhoid, 396. Anyway, it just goes to show, I mean, they're seriously shutting down the world over this when every single day a lot of people die from preventable disease and illness. Again, you guys, it's pathetic. But for them to use that number, coronavirus, the 56 virus, the time old 5G being used to track us when 5G looks a lot like 5.6. And don't overlook that that chart was from 9/3. Wuhan coronavirus 93. So anyway, you guys, that's what I got for now. And yeah, just been grinding hard on the book, trying to make sure it's all right, that it's at that level of quality before I release it. And again, it is very soon. Still not putting a day on it, just because I want to make sure I'm totally satisfied before I go forward. But yeah, if you want to know what the book's all about that I'm working on, you can come right here. You can read the chapter index. I made it 19 chapters for good reason. But yeah, so far I'm really happy. So just cleaning up a few more things. And before long, it'll be off to the press. So I think with that said, we can leave it there, True Seeker. And let me check in with the chat real quick. I see Martin Brown. He says, did you notice that Lakers' first game this season, they lost with 102 points, and they lost with 102 in their last game of the season? Okay, yeah, they like that number 102 in the NBA. Pope Francis lives in Suite 201? Really? Now that's something that is not in my book. Hold on. If that's true, I'll show you something that I did notice that's funny. Pope Francis Suite 201. The spokesman said Pope Francis has moved out of the room he drew by lot before the conclave and into Suite 201. Oh my God, man. Look at what day this article's from. March 26th? Like, okay, okay. March 26th is like 26/3. 263 is the 56th prime. So, Pope has that gematria of 56. Society of Jesus equals 56. And remember, the Jesuit order is 201. Their founder is Ignatius of Loyola, a name that equals 201. Pope Francis's birth name is Jorge Mario Bergoglio, 201. If you write out Catholic Pope, it equals 201. And the list goes on. And now we learn that Pope Francis lives in Suite 201. How did I not know this? See, it's reasons like this I'm glad I haven't finished the book, because at some point I just got to let it go and let it move on. But what a shame it would have been if I would have printed the book and didn't have this in there. So I will definitely put this in. Pope Francis oh my God, I just can't believe it. Yeah, here, let me just read it. Vatican City. Pope Francis has decided not to move into the papal apartments in the Apostolic Palace, but to live in a... Hold on. Ooh, allergies. But to live in a suite in the Vatican guest house where he has been since the beginning of the conclave that elected him, said Jesuit Fr. Federico Lombardi, Vatican spokesman. What's FR an abbreviation for? He is experimenting with this type of living arrangement, which is simple, but allows him to live in a community with others, both the permanent residents, priests, and bishops who work at the Vatican, as well as guests coming into the Vatican for meetings and conferences, Lombardi said Tuesday. The spokesman said Pope Francis has moved out of the room he drew by lot before the conclave and into Suite 201. Man. Amazing. In light of the 226/3 article, I'll show you something else real quick. Let's see. I gotta remember how to pull it up though. Pope Francis encyclical. Okay, so Pope Francis, his second encyclical and the first that he actually authored, because the first one that he published was written by the prior Pope, Benedict. But he dated it May 24th, the 144th day of the year. Jesuit Orders 144. 2 years later on that day is the day Trump would pose with the Pope at the Vatican. Huge number with the Jesuits, 144. And there's a lot to say here. But what he called it was On Care for Our Common Home, Gematria of 263, the 56th prime, the big coronavirus number. And again, what this was about is healing the world and, you know, essentially part of having a green revolution. Remember, everything that's going on with coronavirus is connected to Agenda 21, which is about changing the world by the start of 2021 so that the world can be healthier environmentally. And it's also connected to Agenda 2030, which concluded on the Jesuit Order's birthday, September 27th, 2015. And let me pull this up real quick about Obama. I just want to remind people that Obama, the last president, was at the final day of Agenda 2030, which was September 27th, the Jesuit birthday, and that was Obama's. In 2015, he turned 54 years old. It was his 54th day of being 54 years old on the Jesuit Order's birthday at the last day of Agenda 2030. And again, Jesuit Order 54 like sun. So there can be no mistaking, you know, what is going on and who is responsible. It's too obvious. Agenda 21 took place in Brazil. Event 201, the outbreak starts in Brazil. Thank you very much for the heads up on Pope Francis living in Suite 201. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, June 26th, that's definitely a date to look out for. 26/6, like Pope Francis, the 266th Pope, the Jesuit motto that has the Gematria of 266. Yeah, we've talked about the overlap with the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite and the Jesuits sharing the motto for the greater glory of God. Remember, there's 32 sun rays on the Jesuit logo, and Christ equals 32, and you have to believe in God to be a Freemason. The 846, there's a lot of connections with that, from Adam Weishaupt to the Bible. Yeah, the 846, 8 minutes and 46 seconds on the neck. First plane into the World Trade Center's at 846. Somebody says July 2nd will be the 113th day of the pandemic. You know, speaking of the pandemic being declared on March 11th, 11/3, like 113, Agenda 21 took place April 23rd, the 113th day of the year. One of the big organizations that's part of the planning for this is the Rockefeller Foundation, which equals 113. And of course, Johns Hopkins University's 113, like CladeX is 113. They ran the CladeX simulation 666 days before March 11th when the pandemic was declared. 113, big number of the Scottish Rites. Walter Reed used to be on the 113-acre campus. It was named after the yellow fever researcher. And the Rockefeller Foundation got into vaccines in 1925, developing a vaccine for yellow fever, which failed. Since then, they've tried to develop many other vaccines. But yeah, anyway, you guys, I'm really tired, and I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully I wasn't too boring. I know I'm a little bit flat, but that's just how it is. I'm exhausted, so appreciate all of you guys. Great heads up, and I'm a little bit mind-blown that Pope Francis lives in Suite 201, and somehow I hadn't come across that since I've been talking about 201 nonstop for, since I got back from Louisiana at the beginning of February. Hold on. Let me see. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Russo, who put out, what was his movie called? Freedom to Fascism? He did say that it was one of the Rockefellers who tipped him off about all their plans. And I'd encourage everybody to go back and read the document. Hold on. I got to get the document name right if you're going to look it up. Rockefeller. Yes, scenario. What is it? Scenarios. What? Let me try that again. There it is. Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. Look up this full document and read the entire section. Well, if you have time, read the whole thing, but the thing that's the most important to read in here, I'll just scroll down to it. They have these 4 potential scenarios for how the future world will develop. This was written in May of 2010, so a decade ago. But what's mind-blowing about this is if you read this lockstep section. If you just read the lockstep section, if you just read through all of this, the one with the cameras all over the place, if you read through it, you'll be like, what the hell? That's exactly what just happened. Yeah, so the only thing that's different is it happens in 2012 instead of 2020, but other than that, it's like exactly what's going on. So it's beyond coincidence. And I mean, there's more in here to read that's interesting, but for those with limited time, come to this document and just read the lockstep situation. Okay. Well, when we write that children's book, we got one more great little if you guys haven't heard what I'm saying, when I'm done with the book I'm writing right now, we're going to do a children's version, which will be about 10 pages with just key facts on 10 pages, 10 undeniable sets of facts with some nice illustrations and images. We'll definitely be adding to that list that Pope Francis lives in Suite 201. Unbelievable. I can't believe it. Oh, God. Okay. Whoops. All right, you guys. Sign off for there. I'll be back on for the radio show tomorrow night. Eric 777, who was supposed to be with us last week, he should join us tomorrow, so he'll give us some more good information. All right, truth seekers. Till next time.